everybody. My name is Miss Tess from the Huntington Public Library. Welcome to Tall Tales. Today's story is Paul Bunyan. This is retold by and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. And this is the story of a lumberjack, and it's greatly exaggerated. When we talk about a tall tale, we are talking about a story that couldn't possibly be true. The details are so over the top and enormous. And so Paul Bunyan is a lumberjack who's very, very tall, and he eats an enormous amount of food, and he has his pet ox named Babe who helps him out. And you'll see just how greatly funny and exaggerated this story is. And then stay tuned and make a craft. Bye. Paul Bunyan, a tall tale retold and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. And there's Paul Bunyan as a baby. And here he is. Paul Bunyan was the largest, smartest, and strongest baby ever born in the state of Maine. Even before he learned to talk, Paul showed an interest in the family logging business. He took the lumber wagon and wandered through the neighborhood collecting trees. Now, right there is an exaggeration. A baby can't pull a tree out of the ground, but that's what we mean when we talk about a tall tale. There were so many complaints about Paul's visits that his parents anchored his cradle in the harbor. Look at how big he is. He barely fits in there. All was well until Paul started rocking the cradle and stirring up waves. After his parents had paid for the damage, they decided to move to the backwoods where life would be more peaceful. Paul loved his new wilderness home. He soon grew into a sturdy lad who was so quick on his feet that he could blow out a candle and leap into bed before the room became dark. Every day he joined his forest friends in sports. He raced with the deer and wrestled with the grizzlies. Very exaggerated again. One morning, Paul awoke to find the world under a blanket of blue snow. He heard a moan from inside a snowdrift, and there he found a shivering ox calf. Paul adopted him and named him Babe. Both Paul and Babe began growing at an astonishing rate, but the ox never lost the color of the snow from which he'd been rescued, so he stayed blue. As the years passed, the two of them proved to be extremely helpful in the family business. They cut down trees, that's what loggers do, and they make lumber. At 17, Paul grew a fine beard, which he combed with the top of a pine tree. Look at how big he is. By this time, the other settlers were beginning to crowd into the Maine woods. Paul felt an urge to move on. He said goodbye to his parents and headed west. Paul wanted to cross the country with the best lumbering crew available. He hired Ole, a celebrated blacksmith, and two famous cooks, Sourdough Slim and Cream Puff Fatty. Then he signed up legendary lumbermen like Big Tim Burr, Hardjaw Murphy, and the Seven Hackett brothers. Paul put the camp buildings on wheels so that Babe could haul them from one forest to another. As soon as he had cleared the land, pioneers moved in to set up farms and villages. On the far slopes of the Appalachian Mountains, several of Paul's men were ambushed by a gang of underground ogres called Gumbaroos. Paul grabbed the camp dinner horn and blew a thunderous note into the Gumbaroos' cave, determined to blast the meanness right out of them. To Paul's dismay, the Gumbaroos responded by snatching the entire crew. Oh no. A wild rough and tumble rumpus began inside the den. When that historic tussle was over, the Gumbaroos needed 6 weeks to untangle themselves. Here they are all. They disappeared into the depths of the earth, and they've never been heard from since. Paul's next job was to clear the heavily forested Midwest. He hired armies of extra woodsmen and built enormous new bunkhouses. The men sailed up to bed in balloons and parachuted down to breakfast in the morning. Unfortunately, the cooks couldn't flip flapjacks fast enough to satisfy the newcomers. To solve the muddle, Paul built a colossal flapjack griddle. Looks like they're playing hockey on there. Can you imagine? To surface the surface was greased by kitchen helpers with slabs of bacon laced to their feet, like they're playing hockey. Like I said, this is an exaggeration. Every time the hot griddle was flooded with batter, it blasted a delicious flapjack high above the clouds. Usually the flapjacks landed neatly beside the griddle, but sometimes they were a bit off target. Like here. Paul took a few days off to dig the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes so that barges of Vermont maple syrup could be brought to camp. Fueled by the powerful mixture of flapjacks and syrup, the men leveled the Great Plains and shaved the slopes of the Rocky Mountains. They probably would have sawed the peaks themselves into logs if a blizzard hadn't suddenly buried the entire mountain range. That blizzard continued for several years, snuffing out the springs, summers, and autumns. The crew burrowed into their bunkhouses and hibernated. Babe became so depressed that Paul asked Ole to make a pair of sunglasses for his best friend. When Babe saw the world colored green, he thought he'd stumbled into a field of clover. He began eating the snow with such gusto that soon the treetops reappeared. At that point, all those pent-up springtimes simply exploded, dissolving the storm clouds and the remaining snow. They hadn't had spring and summer for years. Paul and his friends invited some newly arrived, but as they headed southwest, the blistering sun and the giant Texas varmints proved to be more of a problem than they had expected. Travel became so difficult that some of the men began to speak longingly of being buried by a blizzard or bear hugged by a gumbaroo. While crossing the Arizona, the griddle curled up like a burned leaf and the batter evaporated. Deprived of their flapjacks, the lumbermen became weak and discouraged. They're hungry. They just want to eat their flapjacks and work. Paul's great axe, look how big his axe is, fell shoulders, gouging a jagged trench, which today is known as the Grand Canyon. Disaster seemed certain until Paul came up with a desperate plan. He headed east and found a family that could sell him a barn filled with corn. I wonder what he's got on his mind. Babe galloped it back and forth across the desert. When the flaming sunrise hit the barn that was filled with the corn, it exploded, and the lumberjack awoke to find themselves in a raging blizzard of popcorn. Dizzy with joy, they pulled on their mittens and began blasting each other with popcorn balls. A westerly wind kept the cooling clouds of popcorn swirling around Paul and his crew until they crossed California and reached the Pacific Ocean. And he picked up a whale. After he had crossed the country, some say that Paul gave up lumbering and rambled north, searching for new areas of untouched wilderness. With the passing years, Paul was seen less and less frequently. However, along with his unusual size and strength, he seemed to possess an extraordinary longevity, which means he lived really long. Sometimes his great bursts of laughter can be heard rumbling like distant thunder across the wild Alaskan mountain range where he and Babe still roam. And this is north toward Alaska. This is all the land cleared by Paul Bunyan and Babe. This is the Great Blizzard. This is the Maple Syrup Canal, now known as the Great Lakes. Young Paul playing with his friends. Remember the bears, where he lived at home, the Gumberoo's Den, and the trench now known as the Great Canyon, which they say that he made with his axe when he dropped his. Hi, welcome back to Babe the Blue Ox. We're going to make a toilet paper roll craft. So, in the kit that you picked up, you're going to find the set of instructions with this colored image of what Babe is going to look like. There is a template with all the ox parts. When the ox looks a lot like a cow. And what you should, you're also going to have a toilet tissue roll. And this is the top part of the paper. So as you can see, I colored my stuff in already. I used magic markers, but you can use crayons, you can use colored pencils, whatever you have. I just have light and dark blue markers, and I have a glue stick, which is what I'm going to use to glue it all together with. And of course, you're going to need a scissor. Parents, this is definitely something you'll be helping your kids cut out with. So whether that means you're moving the paper and then cutting, or you are just going to guide them along. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that this fits and glue it on like this. So where's my glue stick? I'm going to apply the glue to the marker with the onto the toilet tissue roll like this. You can use tape also if you have tape. You want to try and put your fingers inside it so you're not getting covered with glue, which was happening to me. Okay, so that step one. Let's put this on here like this. And wrap it around just like this. Okay, and if it's a little big, you can either cut it, which is what I'm going to do. Okay. Okay, so step one, this is Babe's body. And I'm going to put that here for a second. Okay, and since I cut my stuff out already, I'm just going to remove this paper. Okay, and then my instructions say to glue on the ox's head first. So I'm going to put it right up top over here. So with my glue stick once again, right here. And I'm going to put it, I would say about midway through, like that. So part of it, okay, like that. All right, and then we've got 2 arms and 2 legs, which look exactly alike, and you've got your little tail over here. This is 2-sided because we're going to glue this around the back, so but we're going to do that last. Next, I'm going to glue the hands on the arms, so either side. So I'm going to go 1 and 2. Here and here. Okay, that's one side. You can even glue it down a little more if you want. Mine are sticking up a little bit. Let's glue them on. We don't want to see all that white paper. So how about like that and like that? And same thing on the other side. 1 and 1. Okay, where's the other leg? Here and here. Okay, and you can cross them over like that if you like. And then last of all, we've got to put the tail on. So that goes in the back. I'm going to put it right there. Here is Babe, the blue ox from Paul Bunyan. I hope you enjoyed it.